Serious, CPS workers of Reddit, what are some horror stories that you've encountered? One of the worst was a case I was jointly investigating with police, and the teen girl was being constantly abused by her stepfather. The girl told me that her stepdad would always tell her they were lovers in a past life and they are celestial soulmates. And told her whenever he would have sex with his wife he couldn't keep his big dick hard unless he thought of her. The mother knew for years what was going on but didn't want to leave him. We confronted the mom about the stepdad and she knew the stepdad couldn't come unless he fantasizes about her daughter. When the detective told the mom she was being arrested, her only response was, "But I have work in the morning." She had no remorse. That will always stay with me. My agency 30 years ago had a boy that was beaten and forced into child pornography. When he was rescued at 8, he had burn marks all over him. And his arms, back, and face had been sliced with a knife. His back had chain whip scars and his arm was broken so badly that it never healed right. And the nerve damage resulted in the need for it to be amputated. The boy spoke with a stutter and was paranoid. He was put in a group home. And then a foster home. He was close with his foster family's neighbors and ran away with them when they moved away. He wasn't found until he was 21. So he was legally allowed to stay with them. We didn't work with him since he ran away. But 2 years ago I saw him being interviewed on TV. He was shockingly healthy looking. No stutter. I hope he found the peace and love he deserved with the family he ran away with. Not with CPS, but I was a child therapist who worked in a school. I saw some really terrible stuff. One thing that broke my heart was a kid who frequently defecated on himself while at school. His parent wouldn't take him to the doctor to make sure there was no physical issue. And wouldn't be bothered to send him with extra clothes or bring him extra clothes. So he would have to spend all day in school with poop in his pants. His teachers would sit a chair outside the classroom near the door so he could still hear the lessons. He wasn't even one of my clients. Because his parent wouldn't agree. Feral children with flat heads living in feces and maggots who could barely speak or talk from such severe neglect. Parents stoned all day and burning the kids with cigarettes for discipline. I see them on Facebook sometimes itching about CPS took their kids for no reason. I used to be really liberal and now I think we should execute parents like that on sight. Kids beaten to death. Babies beaten to death. Kids beaten until they're blind and brain dead. Kids raped so hard they have nerve damage. Babies raped. Kids given Drew Gus. People living in filth. Drew Gus drugs. Drew Gus. No charges for the parents with the feral kids. I lasted 2 years before quitting. $24,000 a year is not enough for the secondary trauma. Intake investigator here. The stuff I see is ridiculous. Walked into an active meth lab that was set up in the same room a little girl was sleeping in. Found a wandering 2-year-old. It was 5 hours before the parents realized he was missing. The cases where I actually do get a removal order. Prepping for court and having to defend why the agency felt the parents couldn't parent. That's almost as bad as investigating the allegations. Babies that haven't eaten in days. Homes that are so unkempt the homeless wouldn't even squat in them. The parents who need mental health services but refuse. Same for the parents who need substance abuse treatment. I see more drug-related allegations than anything. It's one of the most frustrating jobs ever. We have no authority. People don't have to let us in. Or take drug screens. Or talk to us at all. Our hands are so tied that I can't believe we actually can substantiate allegations. People don't realize that we try to intervene or place services with the families to prevent future maltreatment but are unable to do so because parents feel that they don't need the help. Or they dodge the workers' attempts at making contact. In my state we only have so many days to complete an investigation and then we have to close it to stay within state mandated time limits. It's hard work. But for the few kids who you can help it means the world. I work for CPS and I'm still fairly new to the agency. Most of the time, reports of abuse and neglect do not result in kids needing to be removed. So, at least there's that. My most interesting case involved a 12-year-old girl who was a registered sex offender. She had abused her siblings and the parents called CPS to ask for help because they weren't sure how to handle it. The girl ended up being charged. I'm not sure why she wasn't given some sort of inpatient treatment program instead. This happened in another state. But she was put on the registry. Her PO called CPS in my state when she and her family moved out here. Poor kid. She wasn't allowed to swim with her siblings. Couldn't go to school. Couldn't go to the park. Her siblings couldn't have friends over. Etc. Just had a case where the mom was on probation for working with the cartel. Not going to give a lot of information on that. But it was definitely concerning. The ducking cartel. One of my co-workers had a Munchausen by proxy case. This poor girl had so many surgeries and was so messed up that her mother had everyone convinced the girl was paralyzed. We got involved when the girl was 16 years old. She ended up graduating with a 4.0 and going to college. So at least it ended decent. I lasted 3 months. Had to drive kids to and from visitations and such. The worst was a kid whose parent I never met because I gave the case away. A dad who had beaten a small child, around the age of 6, so severely the child had a blown pupil, fractures to the face and other such things. I did meet the child once, and she was adorable. So nice and sweet, seemingly innocent. The family where she was seemed nice as well. Then it came time for me to arrange a visitation with the father. I gave the case to my co-worker and told him that if I saw him in person I would probably flip out and destroy him on sight. 3 months was plenty for me. $24,000 a year. And I was driving around 100 miles round trip daily. Note the duck out. Edit. Words. There is a pretty horrific case in my hometown that resulted in a federal investigation of the county CPS practices. This 8-year-old boy was physically and mentally abused for many years. He regularly had bruises, broken bones, burns, ligature marks, etc. His mom and her boyfriend would send him to school in girls' clothes to humiliate him. The case had been reported to CPS by teachers, medical staff, even neighbors. There was an active worker on his case. Neighbors would hear terrible screams, see the boy bruised, etc. But felt helpless because CPS was already aware of the case. Police would be called to the residence, only to leave soon after. Last year the poor boy died after a marathon torture session by the parents. Neighbors heard horrific screams, loud banging noises etc. But nobody came until the next day where his body was discovered. It caused a lot anger from the community, including suspension of every CPS worker on the case. And the rest going on strike asking for better working conditions. There was simply too many cases per worker. And many of them felt this would have been avoided if there was proper staffing. Texas CPS here going on 5 years. I'm an MSW and now paid about $46K a year and receive great benefits. I would like a different job, but it would have to pay around $55K for it to be worth it for me. So I'm still with CPS. Anyway. Worst cases. Dead toddler who was beaten and raped over the course of a day while mom was at work because she wet her pants. I had to photo all the bruises and what he did to her vag and anus at the hospital. Sometimes I see those pictures in my head still. Dad casually accounting to how he licks and fingers his 5-year-old daughter's vag because I don't know why. Girl who had to have several surgeries to repair her feet because her dad and brothers disciplined her by beating her feet with 2x4s with nails in them. Dad spewing hate about CPS to anyone who will give him a second, but what really happened is he admitted to raping his 2 young daughters since they were in diapers after children disclosed and were screened at the hospital. Despite these being typical cases being called a child stealer by the public. This job is not for people who think the world is an alright place. Kid's mom had a 6 dungeon in the basement. Whips, chains, handcuffs, otherwise pretty intense stuff. It was clear that guys would come into the house and pay to be humiliated. Kid was like 12 or something. We investigated the house, but since there was food in the fridge and the house wasn't a mess, there was nothing we could do. It was pretty weird, but at least the kid wasn't being hurt physically. 3-day-old sodomized by her father. The mother called father to warn him that the police wanted to talk to him. She said she did it because she loved him. They both went to prison. The baby died a couple days after surgery to repair a ruptured bowel and bladder. I don't usually like to discuss this stuff, I want to spare people. But sometimes you just have to tell someone. Short stint as a CPS worker. Had a dad take his kid to the hospital for a broken limb 24 hours after he was told by his ex that dropped the kid off. The kid might have a broken arm. I get there and the other kids are covered in scabies and malnourished. I go see the kid with the broken arm and he has the worst scabies of all the kids. I met dad and he was aloof to all his children looking like crap. I came super close to beating his ass in the hospital. From my wife, who works with disabled, abused, otherwise non-standard kids. One day, we had a potential new kid for our daycare program. We were showing him TH facility. And he noticed a few workers who were replacing a window. Another kid put a chair through it that morning. He looks at them and asks what you Astuckers doing? We were ever so slightly appalled. But then again, the kid has a rough home life. After the tour, we stuck him in one of the groups to see how he got along with other children. Cue a high-pitched scream and a crying kid. What happened? You ask? The little guy had crawled between a skirt-wearing woman's legs and tried to shove his finger right in her lady bits. When questioned, he stated that he does it with his sister all the time. We later learned that the whole family often watched porn together. Hiluhu foster care. And now for the shocker, that little boy was 5 years old. Worst I have ever heard absolutely turned my stomach. Worked with a lovely, kind, docile, funny guy who had formerly worked on mental health service vans. We were having a slow, quiet day and he was telling me why he would not do mental health work anymore. He was called to a farm in Wales where a woman of 21 had been discovered malnourished with rickets and all manner of other problems. Chained up in a horse box. She had been kept there from a young age. She had been kept there by her father. The mother was complicit. She was regularly raped and beaten not just by her father but by his friends too. The guy I worked with was obviously hurt by what he saw. He didn't like his part in the process of helping her. He had to pick her up from a police cell where she had been for 2 days. She wouldn't make eye contact and winced and made a squeaking noise whenever men came near. I have heard some nasty stories but this one is easily the most loathsome. TLDR girl kept in a horse box from young age and raped by father and his associates for years. I work for the state a few times a year as an actor, role-playing abused children to train CPS workers, police, and others who conduct interviews of abused children. We get a child's backstory to memorize. And we have to understand and accurately portray the way a child thinks, behaves and responds to questions. This training is vital, as children have a fluid notion of fantasy and reality that can easily be changed by the process. And the wrong people can end up in jail. Or guilty people can end up back on the streets. The most difficult thing about the job is living these horror stories in your mind and realizing that they are all true. The people who created the program use real case histories for all the characters we play. I tell you, some people are hard. Maybe the job does not bother them. But from the mind of a child, they add to the trauma. The interviewers who connect, calm, and help the most are those who take it a little personal and allow themselves to be affected. I have ultimate respect for CPS and police who do this job. The burnout rate must be high. And that is tragic because their work is so important. I worked in psych for years. I've had several patients who neglected their kids. But nothing as bad as the others in this thread. However, the worst I've experienced was CPS taking a couple's child away because the mother smoked marijuana for her depression. Never around the kids. I mean, if you keep vodka on the counter, that's fine. But smoke some weed by yourself at night, and you get your kids taken away.